Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1092 of our daily content grind. A few weeks ago, we did a video looking at some of the worst toys Optimus Prime ever got, and really, it's not fair of me to do that if I don't also go to the opposite side of Transformers and talk about his counterpart. Megatron gets a fair share of fantastic toys. He's, of course, one of the franchise characters, but that also means that some of them do turn out substandard and just generally awful, for being honest. Now, for the sake of this list, I'm going to conform to the same things I did with the Optimus Prime list. We are not going to be focusing on any super budgeted lines like a lot of the modern cartoon lines. We're not going to do one-step changers or really super gimmicky things. We're not going to deal with like authentics or Happy Meal toys or anything of that nature. We are focused on toys that were designed largely to be good right from the get-go, either from main lines or collector's lines, and they just failed. They absolutely failed. Now, to start off this list, we're going to go into one that is commonly complained about today, and we're going to talk about the Siege Megatron mold. I did a whole video about how many times this mold has been used. Now, I will go on record, this is not a bad Megatron. I'm talking about it now just to kind of get this out of the way. As the Siege Megatron mold, it's fine, because it's representing a Cybertronian tank and doesn't have to hold any kind of like logical standards or design. It doesn't have to conform to anything that looks like an Earth tank. But when you make it Earthrise Megatron, now you have a little bit of an issue, because half of the vehicle is hanging off his back as a backpack. His turret section looks terrible because it's just his arms. Like the barrel of the turret pops off to become a weapon that's incredibly awkward for him to use. This is where it starts getting bad. Along with a lot of the shortcomings that mold has, you also just have, kind of messy elements like this that really hurt it overall. I think as Siege Megatron and a lot of the derivatives, like the Miner and Gladiator Megatrons, I think the toy is fine. Dull, but fine. But when you make it the Earthrise version, and you expect it to look like a real-world tank, then we're getting into bad territory. I don't think it's necessarily awful, though. We want to go for, like, genuinely bad toys here. I'm just doing this to check a box. No, if we want awful tank Megatrons, I have to go to Combiner Wars. I never liked this thing. So for a leader-class large-scale figure, this thing just has so many shortcomings to it. It's an incredibly simple figure. This was $45 at the time of release. And when I'm paying that, $45, $50 for a Transformer figure, I want a rewarding Transformer experience, which I don't get out of a leader class toy claiming to be 15 steps when it's actually only 10. I'm not getting that out of a leader class figure that has very primitive levels of articulation for its size. And then the articulation it does have is very awkward. Its knees are very limited. Look at the placement on the arm, on the shoulders. I have always hated the positioning of the shoulders on this toy. It is so awkward looking. Between the low levels of articulation and just awkward placements like that, you end up with a Megatron that is hard to balance and hard to find a dynamic pose for. The tank definitely looks better than the Siege and Earthrise tanks, but as a Megatron, it's coming up short a lot. I mean, I'd even call that for the cannon, for the arm cannon, because that is a pretty puny fusion cannon for Megatron. I guess it's just kind of sad and pathetic is what it is. Now, it's not the worst of the Megatron tanks. Oh no, we still have a long way to go. Which does remind me, if you've been on this channel for a while, you don't get any brownie points for guessing the figure that's going to come at the end. But if you're just now discovering me because the last one took off, so who knows on this one, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun along the way. Let's talk about the GDO Megatron. Now, I'm on my own island on this one because I've always hated this mold no matter what you do with it. I didn't like it as Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon. I didn't like it as Hunt for the Decepticons Bonsaitron. And I absolutely hated it as Megatron. I've always disliked the weird aesthetic this thing went for, because you've got solid parts that looks like it's G1 derivative, and then you have these like scrawny skeletal parts that look like it's Revenge of the Fallen derivative, and then you even have these like rounded areas that almost look animated derivative. There are so many weird aesthetics going in that it clashes way too much to look like a transformer that knew what it was doing in the engineering process. And then you slap a G1 Megatron head onto it. Now you've lost the plot completely. Now it doesn't look like anything like it should. You factor that in with an enormous amount of kibble that's hanging off of this, an accessory sword that is always bent. I don't care how lucky you are when you pull these things out of the box. Your sword was bent on this version of the mold. And then just, it's in the G2 color scheme when it's nowhere close to the G2 tank. You don't have the camo in the vehicle mode, and you certainly don't have the color layout in the robot mode. And I don't know. I know there's people like the samurai aesthetic. I don't think it's appropriate for Megatron. It's just a very goofy, really goofy aesthetic all the way around. I've just never liked this mold, and I like it even less as Megatron. We do have a contemporary. We do have something that's much newer, and something we were really excited for, and then we got it, and that went away very quickly. And I hate to even include this one, but it's the His Tank Megatron. If you're a G.I. Joe person, and you just love the fact that your nicely scaled, His Tank with Baroness O-ring figure happens to be able to turn into Megatron, great. You're probably thrilled with the toy. The Megatron's a bonus for you. Great. For a Transformer collector, though, that Megatron gets incredibly disappointing. It's so loaded with just shell of His Tank hanging off all over. Really hampers the experience of the toy itself, when really it should have just been like straight transformed from the bulk of the vehicle. But they insisted on keeping the G1 Megatron look, which meant they didn't want Megatron to be colored black. Well, then you get this kibbly mess. And then you couple that in with a very high price point for what it is, and then the hollowness of it. This toy is so hollow, and I'm not one to normally complain about hollow. It generally doesn't bug me on a Deluxe or a Voyager, but this thing is over leader class size, and it's flimsy. It feels bad to actually mess with. I understand in order to transform into a full-size His Tank that can accommodate a 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe figure, it's going to need to budget itself a lot. And, especially if it still has to do the transformation. But then you're back to my point of, he shouldn't have been, the gray Megatron to begin with. He should have actually adapted more to His Tank, so we could have incorporated him into the engineering. That would have actually been cheaper than what they did. Then coming up with all these extra gray parts that don't really need to be in there, and cram, and it just feels so forced. It just feels like they could have done so much better than this. I think this was just disappointing. We wanted G.I. Joe Transformers for so long, and when we finally got them, they roll out the most obvious one you can do, and it just didn't hit the mark. Decades of expectation completely spoiled by reality, and that is so disappointing. Maybe we need to do away with the idea of like G.I. Joe's piloting these things and just make a Voyager class Megatron that turns into a His Tank. That might turn out to be better. They have gotten better with these, but Megatron was the first one out of the batch, and sometimes the first one out of the batch is what they train themselves on to do better next time. Sorry, Megatron. Let's get away from any tank whatsoever. Let's go and venture into a completely new and different realm of Megatrons, and that is jets. What is this? What were they thinking with this? Now, there is the idea here that what we're actually looking at was Megaplex, the Machine Wars body double of Megatron, and that actually their names were switched on the cards, or the figures were swapped in the packaging, and that the mostly light gray one is supposed to be Megatron because it looks much closer to his natural colors. And then the blue one we see here is actually supposed to be the clone. But that's not how they were sold. This one is officially Megatron, and it's like the nicest looking Megatron ever, you know? Like the sculpting on his face isn't really all that mean. He looks like a weak version of a Seeker, which is so not what Megatron would ever do. And the fact that he's so tiny. He's so tiny in Machine Wars. Like, I can't take him seriously as, like, the leader of the Decepticons when he comes up to, like, Starscream's knee. He's so cute. He's so adorable. It's just, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, even if this was a swap, why would you give him such, like, this ice blue and light gray color scheme just looks so nice. You know, he doesn't look villainous. But you know what? It's not the only time that ice blue and light gray would be a Megatron color. Let me talk about the movie Megatron. I hate this thing. I hate this thing. I didn't like its awkward automorph that I just felt was pointless and ineffective on this figure. I don't like that huge sections of him are made of the ice detail. Because guys, if you didn't know, in the 07 movie, Megatron was frozen. So all of his toys had ice blue, a color he never had in the movie, even when he was frozen. But it was their excuse not to release an all-flat gray toy. And then when it sold out, and everyone kind of complained about this, Hasbro re-released his major toys all gray like we wanted before. Because screen accuracy is always going to sell best. And then so I never liked the idea that, like, he's covered in ice because, hey, he was frozen for a little bit in the movie. Couple that with what I find to be kind of a messy looking vehicle mode, even for movie 1 Megatron. And weird things in the engineering. Like, part of the automorph is his feet are spring loaded to close. You have any idea how awkward this thing was to just sit down on a desk when its feet were constantly closed and you had to, like, find and settle it on the points and hope that you're at the, just try to, like, finagle it so, to get the feet to slide open while you were setting it down. I don't know why. I don't know why every now and then Hasbro thinks that's the thing to do, to, like, make the feet automatically close when he's not flat-footed. Stop doing that. It's never good. It never works. It's always dumb. I don't like this thing. I've never liked this thing. Let's get into some weird ones. We're going to get into a couple of weird ones, and because they are weird ones, no surprise, it has come from Fun Publications and BotCon, as well as the Transformer subscription service. And this one, yeah, I don't know why this exists. I take that back. I do know why this exists. So for one BotCon, FunPub blew out their budget by actually producing a Pretender shell. They'd done new heads in the past, but never had they done something that technically qualifies as a full action figure that is entirely made themselves, because they were trying to recreate an unreleased double Pretender from Generation 1 named Oil Master that had 2 Transformers that got stuffed inside of him. Well, for the BotCon release, they picked the Swerve mold, and this was back when the Legends class toys had the little, like, Target Master-esque mini Transformers along with them. Those got crammed into this shell together, and, like, boom, that's our double Pretender. Nothing like the original concept, but hey, we got a big gorilla out of it. But because it was a gorilla with a truck inside, they went, hey, we need to get another use out of this to kind of compensate for the fact that we paid for an entire action figure mold. So they reran it as Optimus Prime. A Swerve toy got rerun as Optimus Prime. Figure that one out, please. But because they did an Optimus Prime, they decided to do a Megatron. And they decided to desecrate one of the rarest pieces in Transformers, that being the Pretender shell for Grand Maximus, to actually do another double Pretender nonsense thing. So they forcibly crammed this Legends class Warpath repaint, which is repainted in an unreleased Hero Megatron colors, which didn't match the Optimus Prime they released. and cram that in there with a tiny little space warp. I don't know why they decided this was a good idea. I don't know who thought anyone would ever want a pretender shell painted like G1 Megatron with an unreleased G2 Megatron crammed into it. I don't know. Like, this is so weird. Inherently, that is not a bad little mold. I liked it as Warpath. I don't like it as Megatron. And I don't like it's. Oh no. It's a weird release. It's a weird release done for very weird reasons. But it's not the weirdest one. Believe it or not, it's not the weirdest one. FunPub also brought us this for BotCon one year. They only did this because they knew fans wanted the breakdown mold from Prime that didn't get released in our American toy line back in the day. So they got their hands on it and decided, we're just going to do a Prime or G1-esque version of movie Megatron out of this mold. Something nobody asked for. Absolutely nobody wanted this thing. It's a movie Megatron that doesn't look like movie Megatron. It's a Megatron that's supposedly his own thing, but it's in a set called Cybertron's Most Wanted, and like this is one of the least wanted Megatrons ever. This was one of those toys that when FunPub lost the license and they were like court ordered to sell off all of the assets they still had, this was one of the things you could get during their huge fire sale. When you could get a BotCon exclusive for less than the retail price the mold would normally go for, that is a bad toy that nobody wanted. It's just the weird things that they did at the time, thinking like, oh, we are doing the coolest thing. We're giving you the mold you always wanted in a way we never asked for. It's not even clever. It's not even clever. It's just weird. It's weird. It's weird, like Dark of the Moon Megatron in a Prime style body. It's a weird idea. You know, it just feels like it's a Megatron for nobody, you know? It just feels like, you know, like, I'm sure there's people who like it, but man, like, I don't understand why. I don't understand why they even thought to do it. Okay, we're getting into the stretch here. So from here, I know I've mentioned a few toys that technically aren't that bad, but as Megatron, they do turn out to be bad. And ones that, they're like oddballs that people tend to like, you know? Like, this is a lot of me just airing personal grievance against some of these things. We are going to finish with a stretch of genuinely bad Megatron, so brace yourself, and we're going to start with Masterpiece of all places. So after they did Starscream, Optimus Prime, and Grimlock, they decided the next, now we put it off long enough, we actually have to figure out how do we make Megatron work. And they took the same concept behind MPO1 to apply it to this figure. And the idea was that what if we actually take the G1 style transformation and we upgrade that the same way we did to Convoy? What you get is a extremely lanky, very fragile Megatron that just feels awkward to play with. I remember transforming this one day and the leg just completely pulled off when I tried to extend it out. You are left with something that is very, very lanky, very fiddly, very like wobbly. It's a very unstable figure because it's got die-cast parts. It can't really hold up. It's got very tiny joints from very large parts. It has this incredibly awkward giant fusion cannon, which is so out of proportion, it's absurd. Proportions, by the way, are completely non-existent on this figure, from the scrawniness of the arms and legs, the width of the chest, the size of the head. But this was them trying to modernize the G1 Megatron gun toy. Okay, fine. The gun mode is like ridiculously oversized. Like you would probably have to be like, an Andre the Giant Big Show, like gigantic 7.5 foot tall, like monster of a human being in order to even remotely come close to holding this thing. Yeah. And it gets worse. It got worse when most copies of this toy started yellowing because all the parts started rusting. That doesn't normally happen. Yeah, this one was just so bad. Like, clearly, engineering-wise, Takara was not ready to tackle Megatron, and certainly from the direction they attempted to tackle him from, they were not prepared for it. They just felt like they were at a point where they had to get a Megatron out, and it just feels very rushed, very half-baked, and it's just one of the worst releases in Masterpiece, period. If we want to get to even worse Megatron, no surprise that we have to go to Beast Machines. And we have to talk about that thing. I hate this thing. This was a deluxe sold as a Mega Class toy, by the way, because they felt they could get away with it. The transformation is lame. It's boring. It has an action gimmick on the neck that's supposed to like spring forward to bite. Doesn't work and makes it look like his neck is broken in beast mode. He's got no arms in his proper robot mode with a cape over to kind of match his look in the cartoon. His in normal robot mode, looks like, I don't know, like a very cheap knockoffy version of his Transmetal 2. I even hate the wings. I hate the wings because it's just that shell folded up and it looks so broken. They don't look like wings. They don't look like wings in the dragon mode. It's so bad. They look like your window curtains that the cat clawed up. This thing is just terrible all the way around. At every direction, this toy is absolutely abysmal and one of the worst Megatron toys I have ever had the displeasure of actually messing with. And I still want to talk about it in greater detail for one day, but that is for another day. Today we need to move on. The video's getting long, and we still have 3 to go. And we're back to tanks, by the way. I shouldn't include it, but I included it on Optimus, so I'm going to include this abomination. Build-to-Rule Megatron might be the absolute worst of all the Build-to-Rule toys there were. Incredibly long legs, incredibly tiny arms. I don't know why they went with T-Rex proportions for him, but they did. And then suffering all the other messes that Build-to-Rule suffered from. Imitation Lego engineering that didn't really feel good and didn't really connect well and didn't really give you the option of playing around with it the way Lego does. A lot of excess parts left over, no real transformation that really amounts to anything. This figure was so lame, they had to throw in a Cyclonus just to kind of make you feel like you didn't get completely ripped off. I shouldn't put it in here because, Build-A-Rule is a Lego set. It's not really aimed at, collectors or anything, but, it was kind of viewed as, a spin-off of Armada that they were trying to get kids into because, of course, you're trying to sell off your Lego sets. It's abysmal. A lot of that line is. But this one, whew. This one was the king. This is the worst of them all. And we're coming to the end of the video, so finally, if you know this channel, you've been waiting for this moment, because it's one I talk about a lot. But hey, it's a perfect video to bring it up again, especially for those who are newer to the channel and may not know. It's time to talk titanium. But not the one you want. We're going to do the second one first. It's designed off the War Within design. I'll give you this, the robot mode does look great. The robot mode looks good. It doesn't play good. Its articulation, very stunted. Very limited in the hips due to detenting. No real good shoulder articulation. Just back to, old school 90s. Old school 90s, Playmates and Toy Biz articulation. He looks fine as a display piece if you like War Within designs. When you actually want to use him as a transformer, you fold up his arms, you squash his legs, you cover his you cover his head with a shield. That's the transformation. It's 3 steps. It's not even 3 steps. It's 2 steps, and then you put an accessory on him. Lame. This figure is so lame. And it's lame because this was them trying to make up for their first attempt at a Megatron in this line. Yeah, this is still the worst toy I have ever played with, ever. I did a whole Plastic Addict on it. I have repeated myself multiple times. The worst Transformer ever produced. I said it at TFCon. I said it in a video a few years ago when I said, here are the real worst Transformers there ever were. And it still holds true to this day. Die cast in the worst places. Extremely loose joints. Parts held on by C-clips, and by parts I mean his legs. Transformation that is boring, vehicle mode that is boring and nonsensical, paint apps that are messy and sloppy all over and look bad, a Megatron that's designed after absolutely nothing, robot mode details that are flat, lifeless, devoid of personality, devoid of function, devoid of play value, devoid of anything that makes a Transformer worth buying. And this was all wrapped up in a deluxe that was $15 because of terrible use of diecast. This thing is an abomination. This thing is still the worst Transformer toy that exists. I don't think they will ever produce anything that is akin to it. Keep in mind, yeah, I know there's Authentics out there that are pretty bad, but Authentics are made to be super dirt cheap and huge for that price. That's the point of them. If we're talking about stuff that was aimed for collectors, and Titanium was aimed at collectors because, oh, hey, diecast. This thing sucks. This thing is absolutely the worst. It will always be the worst. And I'm sure it's not the last time I'm going to tell people that. As always, what amounts to a bad toy is strictly a matter of opinion. I'm sure I have mentioned a toy on this list that you probably like, and there is nothing wrong with that. We have differing opinions, and that's okay. Just don't start raising a lot of noise about it in the comments. Feel free to disagree, but don't get rude about it. That's all I ask. And then you can discuss away as to what the worst Megatron toy is of all time in the comments below. But I will leave you to that, and I will bid you adieu. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you next time.